So the suggestion here is that all there is no thing apparently happening. You could call it energy. I like calling it energy. There's boundless energy, boundless, without any meaning or purpose at all. And within that boundless energy arises a contracted energy. Because boundless energy and everything is free, it can be anything. So anything can happen. It's only apparent though. Nothing is real. So contracted energy can arise. And when it arises in the human being, because it can happen anywhere, but when it arises in the human being, it brings about a sense of a center. Suddenly there's a feeling of being someone or being something. There's a sense of being something. And what follows that almost immediately is self-consciousness or self-awareness arises only at that time. Suddenly there is a sense of individuality. And the other thing that comes with that sense of individuality is a sense of being on your own in that center, alone in that center. And so suddenly that one that is alone in that center is also separate from everything else. And everything that's happening seems to be happening to that person, you could say, or that center. And as that person grows and develops, so it begins to be realized that everything that is happening to that person, being experienced by that person, is somehow separate to it. It's happening to it as an individual, as an energy. That's the feeling. I am real, and what's happening is happening to me from outside. It's coming to me as a happening. So the individual that is then the individual doesn't really see the sky or trees or other people or have thoughts or anything like that in a natural way. It has them as experiences for it. So it experiences the sea and the sky and the trees and other people, and it experiences thoughts as happening to it. They are happening to it rather than just being what they are, naturally, just trees, sky, thoughts, just naturally arising without anybody. Suddenly there is somebody they are happening to. And the feeling about that sense of being separate is different, but also unsatisfactory. There's something about it that takes the wholeness away from everything. It's as though it's a confined, narrow world that's being lived in which everything that's happening seems to be happening to this individual in here. And after a while, for some people, that isn't satisfying. There's something dissatisfying about it. So they start to seek to be satisfied, to look for something more satisfying. So seeking is happening. And what they're seeking is a wholeness. There's something that's not whole about the sense of being separate and living in a dualistic world. It's a subject-object world that's now being experienced, which is somehow unsatisfactory. And so seeking begins to look for a satisfaction, a wholeness. But because the individual is dualism and lives in dualism, and because it experiences everything in a subject-object way, then because it's experiencing people happening to it, it's the subject, and what's happening to it is the object. So because of that, what it looks for in its search is, let's call it a search for enlightenment or search for wholeness or whatever you like to call it. But the problem for the individual living in the dualistic world is that the individual objectifies what it's looking for. So it sees everything, wholeness, oneness, whatever you like, as an object that can happen to it like the sky happens to it, like other people happen to it. That's all it knows. All it knows is that everything is happening to it. What it longs for, what it seems to seek, can also happen to it. So it can take ownership of wholeness or oneness or whatever you like. It can take ownership of that, as it does take ownership of the sky that's happening to it, other people that are happening to it. It takes ownership. It becomes a rich person. And so when it's looking for whatever you like to call it, enlightenment or a greater satisfaction, it wants to own that for itself. And that's what renders the whole seeking energy utterly and completely and wonderfully futile. Because what it really longs for is not ownable. What it really longs for can't be known. What it really longs for frightens it really, because what it really longs for is its own absence. What it really longs for is absence. And in absence, all there is nothing apparently happening. So thank you. And if somebody would like to ask a question, that would be good.
I think the first questioner is Anthony Lerman. So Anthony, if you would like to, yes.
Thank you very much. Hello again, Tony. It's lovely to see you again. I saw you about 3 years ago in Copenhagen, and it was pure joy. So. Oh,
and I'm even more good looking now.
Yeah, that's right.
Hello.
Right. Good. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think you put it very well. And I noticed there's a question over here, which is that I understand that what is hearing this voice. Okay, this speaking that's going on right now, we can call it nothing. You know, nothing is hearing this. It's just being heard. But couldn't we also just call it a different label, like consciousness is hearing this, or awareness is hearing it, or I don't know, energy is hearing it? Couldn't, you know, what's?
Well, you could say it. Energy, it's just arising in energy, and but there is nothing that's here in reality. There's nothing that's hearing it. It's just what's happening. But directly you use the word awareness or consciousness, as far as I'm concerned, the words awareness and consciousness are actually another form of knowing. But for there to be knowing, there needs to be a knower. So in the dualistic world, there probably are hundreds or thousands of knowers who know that they are hearing something. But directly they know they are hearing something, they are separate from it. This is again separation arising, which the seeker wants to end in a sense, because the whole sense of separation is unsatisfying. So consciousness and awareness of this voice is simply happening in dualism, and can only happen in dualism, because dualism is that in which there are two. There's the voice and there's the one that hears it. That's what is apparently happening in dualism. In the natural reality, all there is what appears to be happening. And what appears to be happening, including this voice speaking and that voice hearing it, is completely and utterly without meaning or purpose. It can't be known, and there is nothing that knows it.
Yeah.
It's only in the world of dualism that what's happening is known by an individual.
Yeah, so nothing hears it, and you're not using nothing like a something, like consciousness or awareness.
No. Consciousness is an act of knowing. You're not listening.
Well, I'm doing my best.
Consciousness is an act of knowing. When that illusion of you being somebody who knows something falls away, all there is what happens. And in what happens, the voice can arise, but it's just arising completely on its own without any meaning or purpose.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for taking the question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for asking it. It's only apparently asking.
Okay.
There's nothing that's real.
Right, okay. Thank you.
So now we have John Mark, please.
Hi, John. Put your sound on, John.
You need to put your sound, unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you.
Hello, John.
How are you?
Yeah, good. You?
No, I approached the same question last time I talked to you, so please forgive me. And I understand, you know, as I'm standing waiting to have this question presented to you, I realize how meaningless that I will never understand any of this. And I realize
you're not meant to.
Right. I gave up wanting to understand. Now I think I'm reaching for a sense much more than anything else, because I have already a partial sense of something that is bringing about this question over and over again in my mind. So I'm just playing with it. And since I have the opportunity to have you here, I'm going to present it again. And that has to do with the complete lack of free will, so-called. That since there's no one here, there's no choice, and there's never a choice being made by anyone, because there's no one. However, in the appearance, it certainly appears like constantly that there are constant choices being made in the appearance.
Yeah.
And if I've heard, so far what I've heard makes me feel that regardless of what's unfolding, happening, and regardless of what the apparent choice is, it will have no effect on any level.
No.
It's already complete. It's already whole. There's only completeness and wholeness, and so it's kind of pointless. It's this pointless exercise that the body, the mind, the ego mind, you know, engage himself with absolutely no value whatsoever.
No, because there is no meaning or purpose in anything.
Right. So again, you know, I'm just rambling. Allow me, please. So between someone who would appear to do a great deal of research, of weighing the cons and the pros to reach a certain decision, maybe a life, you know, a life important decision, to someone who, compared to someone who just, I was going to say live in the moment, there's no moment, but to someone who just goes
very spontaneous.
Who doesn't even question, you know, whether it goes to whatever becomes obvious. You know, I mean, a lot of those apparent decisions, I understand, at least the one related to survival of the body, they happen no matter the body will, something will come out of the body apparently that says, yeah, you know, choose this food over this, or this drink, or whatever, decaf or no, you know, this kind of, all these little decisions that happen. And I see how, you know, there'd be a lot of those so-called decisions or apparent decisions being simply what happened.
But no, there aren't, some of them are what you're describing altogether, together with the person who takes a lot of time to deliberate over something, and another one who's spontaneous. All of that is what's apparent happening. It's completely without any meaning at all. In the story of the individual thinks it's really important to choose this car or that car, and so on, and takes a lot of time to do it. But actually what's apparently happening is completely and utterly without any meaning or value of any kind.
But also,
because there's nothing happening at all. It only appears to be happening. It's not real. There is nothing that is real.
So there's only even the consequences are just appearances.
Totally.
So there's no consequence as to you.
There aren't any consequences. No, there are no consequences, except in the dreamer who lives in the story thinks there are consequences.
Right.
But in reality there aren't any, because there's nothing happening. There is nothing happening. There is nothing happening.
Right. Well, that's obviously the foundation. Nothing is happening. But for the dreamer, like you say, with a part that is engaged into the appearance, there's actually a fear of consequences, which triggers the whole choosing process. You know, so I have to be careful because you know the consequence is this body might die, this body might this, or this may happen, blah blah blah. But it's just the fear.
Yeah. And it arises in the individual who's in the dualistic story, who believes that the story it's living is real, and there are real circumstances or consequences. As you can see in the world we live in.
So yeah, and there is this nothing. It's funny, you know, we have this, I have this tendency, this urge to want to anthropomorphize this nothing.
Yeah.
to clothe it in some kind of presence, so I can relate to it better. Okay.
Good. Thank you.
I think thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Okay, now we've got a question from someone called Vin de Crescenzo. Sorry about my accent. Vin de Crescenzo.
Yes. Hi, Tony. Good to see you.
Hiya.
My question is this. I've heard you share the stories of apparent people who were on a spiritual seeking path and then unknew the illusion of being an individual.
So you said that bit again.
Sure. And then, then unknew the illusion of being an individual.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was wondering, do you have stories of apparent people you can share who were never, ever on any spiritual path that also unknew the illusion of being an individual?
I'd have to think about that. I'd have to think about that. Yeah. I think there has to be some sort of sense of inquiry. There has to be some, as I said in my beginning talk, some sense that being a separate individual in the dualistic world is somehow unsatisfactory, and that brings about a sense of looking for something else. That's happening. Well, it happens in the whole world, but people wouldn't recognize it as seeking. Everybody in the world who lives in the individual separate world is somehow unsatisfied, even if they don't recognize it themselves. And so a lot of people who don't know anything about what we're talking about here or anything about spiritual seeking seek an experience to divert them away from the sense of being separate and alone. So they seek all sorts of pleasurable or otherwise experiences in order to distract themselves from the sense of being alone and separate.
Okay,
so actually everybody in the world is a seeker.
Everyone is a seeker. But the unknowing might happen despite the seeking, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, totally. So, of course, the unknowing, as far as that's concerned, has whatever is going on has nothing to do with the unknowing. The unknowing doesn't need any sort of condition for it to suddenly be apparent, because of course, actually, it isn't waiting in a cave to leap out on anybody. Right. There is only already unknowing. What we seek is already everything. It isn't waiting somewhere to jump on us.
But you did, I'm interested because you did mention that there sort of has to be some curiosity about the separation for really the unknowing to happen. So that kind of implies...
It doesn't have to be, but there can be.
It can be, okay. So, but it could happen even without that. It could just be the normal dissatisfaction and separation.
Yeah, but then you're implying that something's going to happen. There isn't anything that happens. Already everything is unknowing.
Unknowing, yeah. Okay.
And all that's in the way of that is that which wants to know. So it's just the individual who's separate that is trying to make unknowing happen, but can't, because unknowing is all there is already. It isn't somewhere else waiting for something to happen. It already is all there is. All there is unknowing.
Okay. So people who or the parents of people who are not actively seeking spirituality could, in theory,
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I'd be interested if we heard from anyone that happened to, because it seems like we've never heard that.
Right. But what would that mean to you then?
It's just it's a curiosity, because you know, the idea that the spiritual seeking path doesn't lead to the unknowing, I accept that. But if it seems to only happen to people who are on a spiritual path, then there's a question there to me that maybe that's not quite right.
No, then that implies what your feeling is, that this thing that you say will happen, which doesn't happen because it's already everything,
Yes.
it only happens in certain conditions, and that absolutely
Right.
isn't because it isn't actually happening. So it
Right.
doesn't need any conditions because
Yes.
it is all there is. The only other thing that's interesting is I know of quite a few people who have been in contact with me who have suddenly come across this message, but were never, they say, they were never seekers of any kind at all, and they just came across this as if by accident.
That's fascinating, yeah, to me. Thank you very much.
Okay, so Anne Lewis, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, Anne?
Yes, so my question is, what is apparently happening for me much of the time is that I seem to be expected to be at work making decisions that seem to have real consequences, or seem to. I'm actually a doctor, I deliver babies and do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I can't, much as I see and am compelled by the thing, I don't know how does the parallel dual world, which still on some level exists, continue with you in it, apparently in it, if there isn't anybody and no one's making any decision. There is a sort of, there's something that seems incompatible that I can't
yes, this message
work out.
is totally incompatible. It doesn't make sense. But if you go back to the original thing that I said at the beginning, all there is what's happening or apparently happening. And if you are apparently making decisions about what you're doing in your work, it's not real, it's only apparently happening. There isn't anybody doing it. And there's no explanation for that, and it doesn't make sense. This message doesn't make sense.
So what if this sort of if the self dissolves and this happens or doesn't happen or is suddenly more apparent, do people continue with their normal lives in a way?
Usually, but they don't continue because there aren't any people continuing. There never were any people doing what they were doing before. They just dreamed that they were people doing something before. And then when the sense of self simply is no more, then that doing will probably continue, but it will be recognized that there's nobody doing it. That's a dramatically different thing. It's dramatically different. Suddenly there's a freedom in what seems to be being done, because the self, with all its conditioning and ideas about what is right and wrong, are simply not there anymore. And suddenly all there is what's happening. It's about something that's very simple and very ordinary, but quite extraordinary in its freedom.
I totally get that, but at the same time there is this weight of knowing things that seems so important in particularly what I do, knowing things, intervening appropriately, doing the right thing, this weight of ethics and things. Somehow it just seems so hard to sort of marry with a sense that no one's doing anything.
No, you don't have to marry it, and you don't have to drop knowing happening about something, but it isn't you that has that knowing. Knowing is what is happening. So when the whole sense of you is no more, there will still be that knowledge. It will still be, and not only that, it will be functioning without the limitations of your subconscious mind in the way. So there'll just be a very straightforward, simple knowing that's amazingly free and effective.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
When it happens, give me a ring. Because you will say, what you will say is, okay, Tony, I was talking to you before, and now I suddenly see that there isn't anything that's happening in terms of people doing things. There is just what's happening, and it's absolutely amazing. But the only problem I have is I can't tell anybody else about it. It can't be described. It just can't. And you will also say to me, I can't even tell you what this is about, although you're talking about it. I can't tell you what this is like. It's beyond knowing.
Yep. No, I get. I don't believe you, but I
No, you don't have to. You don't have to.